Hi, I'm Don Atack. This is my lovely guest, Joe Kelly. I'm very happy to see. And we've just leapt off a call with Pat Ryan. Was there any more that you wanted to add to what we were talking about
Well,
there?
I think the intriguing thing about what's happening now, and it keeps coming to the fore, with the current nativism, nationalisms that seem to be springing up in the West and in the East as well. I mean, some of the same problems are arising in Indian society. And so the Hindu party wants to dominate the discussion. The Islamists in Pakistan and we have, I think, a concern in the U.S. Of what's happening with the structure and the tone of the political discussion and where that's leading families. So the same replication that we've seen in our work with cultic groups seems to be arising within society in general. So when you look for solid sources of information on a topic, where do you search and what can you rely on? How can you evaluate the source of information? Which is something that we, as cult educators, if you will, or new religious movement interests, would have been talking about for the last 30 years. We're now seeing it arise in a general way in the culture.
Yes.
And John, are you seeing the same kinds of things in the UK that we're seeing in the US, as far as groups like QAnon and white supremacy growing? Is that still? I mean, is it very much a part of what you're experiencing in the UK?
It's not been the same. There is a popularist movement, and that's happening throughout Europe, largely aimed at removing countries from the European Union. And of course, the United Kingdom has now left the European Union. And there was tremendous division. I think that the way that particularly Aggregate IQ, which was the Robert and Becca Mercer's outfit here, Cambridge Analytica was the one that was running the Trump campaign, that they caused division by targeting non-voters. That was their strategy, and going to people who've given up on the system, very much as they did with to support Trump, and saying, the system has failed. And here the slogan, and it's a brilliant slogan, was "Take back control." And in fact, Nigel Farage, who led the campaign to leave Europe, has inserted this. He's currently giving financial advice, and he's saying, "Take back control of your finances."
Fascinating.
This wonderful coverall expression, which take back control of what precisely? We're not really sure what. But so there has been a division, and I think with the COVID-19 that has become more of an emphasis here. In the US, you've got the QAnon suddenly out of nowhere, starting on 4chan and the dark web, Chan video gamers, and then now saying there are about 3 million people on the Facebook accounts, which have, I think, been closed now. 71 people from 71 countries. The FBI 2 years ago declaring them a terrorist organization, but with no mandate from the president to do anything about them.
This is part of the problem when you have leadership using these concepts for their own gain. He could easily come out and say that this is absolute balderdash. This is nonsense. There's no reality here, and yet hasn't done that. And so when we look at the value of information and how to absorb and digest it, it's an inundation now that I don't think we've had in the past. And the fact that we've all been so locked down and entertaining ourselves with technology, the information that's available, has created a whole new wave of interest in alternative ideas.
Yes.
And we're finding families struggling with loved ones who are absorbing, embracing, and acting upon these new ideas without real solid understanding of the genesis of the concept, and how to help these individuals who seem very angry and changed by the information. The good thing is that if I want to look at a group that's considered controversial and has been found to be harmful to some people, I can go to the web and find that information now. But we also can assume that that textbook, that syllabus that we could print out and share with our loved one who's exploring these new ideas may not be enough to change their mind. That the information in and of itself may not be helpful to the individual. Whereas some people will look at the challenges to the ideas and say, oh yeah, I've been all wrong. But then there's many who are only going deeper in order to prove themselves right, and that there must be an answer here. I must be able to find it in these various sources and YouTube videos.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that I've wrestled with for some years. I've given various talks about propaganda analysis and how to pull apart fake news. A few years ago, corresponded with Anthony Prakonis, the great legendary.
Who wrote the book? Yeah, I have his book just up there.
Yeah, Age of Propaganda.
Age of Propaganda.
With Aronson, and it's an excellent book called Weapons of Fraud, where he looks at the way people are conned on the telephone. But he's the editor of Influence magazine. He's a great expert professor. And so I wrote to him. I have his acquaintance. And so I wrote to him and said, how about starting with the Institute for Propaganda Analysis points? And these were first made public in 1938. And I was hopeful that Anthony would say, oh, no, you need to come up to date. You need to read this, this, and this. I thought, it'll make it easy for me. And he came back and he said, yeah, they're great. And so since then, those points, which are on Wikipedia, anybody can look them out. For example, it starts with...
Yeah, well,
it starts with glittering.
I hadn't heard of this. Could you repeat that?
The Institute for Propaganda Analysis. It was a body of social...
Institute for
Propaganda Analysis. It's a body of social scientists in the US. And the organization was closed down in 1942, just after Pearl Harbor. Because if you then look at the wave of propaganda of how much we should love Uncle Joe Stalin and how the Chinese are such wonderful people, that kind of changed a little bit in the following years. But they give a very simple analysis, glittering generalities when somebody's making wild statements about how wonderful and marvelous things are, how every politician seems to end the statement with, we are the best people, in this room. These techniques of seduction are easy to see. I think the one that is hard is how you determine the authority of the person you're listening to. When I left Scientology, I'd been told all sorts of nonsense. For example, we read books by Adele Davis. I can remember.
Oh, yeah.
Eat right to keep fit. Now, the Adele Davis story goes on a little bit further because she was taken to court because somebody had died following one of
her diets.
And it then came out that while the end of her books are packed with reference notes, she actually hired a team of people to find anything on the subject she was talking about and put it in the reference notes. These weren't things that she'd referred to, and they in fact largely contradicted what she was saying. So I didn't know that then, but when I came away from Scientology, I've been, they use massive doses of vitamins. So I went and found a standard textbook by a professor of nutrition, a man called Bender, who was at one of the London universities. And he, for example, said, well, for most people, daily, you need about 180 milligrams of vitamin C. And what will happen if you take more than this is that it will come out in your urine. If you then stop taking the supplement, you will get the deficiency syndrome, which is scurvy, I think, with vitamin C, because your body has got used to expelling the vitamin. So it kind of changed my mind about...
Interesting.
Yeah. I
about the use of supplements.
Yeah. And the point is, a vitamin is something that is essential for life, but you only need a certain amount of it. And having more of it, and it's like novice gardeners have found this out when they decide to double or triple the amount of fertilizer they put on plants, and the plants die, because it's poisonous at a certain dose. Yes. And so you have people at the moment taking ridiculous doses of vitamin D, which we need 400 to 800 international units of a day. You have people taking 10,000 units because they've read something or other about COVID-19.
Yeah, I think Fauci even mentioned the benefit of vitamin D at some point.
You have to have vitamin D.
Yeah,
zinc oxide. They're protective against all viruses. They're part of how putting more in.
Some is good, more is better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So my approach has generally been that if I look at something, I want to look at different points of view, and I want to know what the authority of the person is. Just because somebody's a university professor doesn't mean that their ideas will be right. So you can look at the controversy that surrounds certain ideas. I mean, in our field gives a very strong expression of this. There are academics, Gordon Melton, for example, more recently Benjamin Zeller, who I've come up against, and they present. These people are PhDs; they know their stuff, and yet when I read their stuff, I go, "No, this isn't factually correct." So sometimes you have to look at the references that they're giving. It's like if somebody's reading my work, my book, Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, has nearly 1,200 reference notes. And so if I say Ron Hubbard said this, you can go and find where he said it. So references is a very important part, and checking them occasionally, checking what people say and seeing if it's accurate. I think it's fantastic seeing the fact-checking sites that are coming along. One has to hold the reservation that they may be working for a particular agency or group. So
even that,
yeah. But nonetheless, there's a consistency in information that's contextual. So when a friend of mine the other week said that Lenin actually got to Russia, he was flown from Canada. He didn't, as our history books say, come from Switzerland on a German train with the agreement with the Germans that he would overthrow the Kerensky government and leave the war with Germany. So he put forward this view, and I said to him, well, where does this come from? And he said, well, I don't remember. That's not a very good reference. I was then talking to my friend Yuval Law, and he said, well, if he flew from Canada, where did he stop? Because there were no transatlantic.
There weren't any direct.
But people will accept something without taking Occam's razor to it, without saying the simplest solution is probably
the right solution. Yeah.
And you get in, the complexities now with QAnon, these conspiracy theories, this idea that we have David Icke in this country. I don't know if he's made it to the US.
Yeah. Well, he was very popular with the channeling groups back in the 80s and 90s, when people like Ramtha had incorporated his ideas into their own teachings.
Yeah. And
so that's where we first learned of David.
Yeah. He put forward this view in the 1990s that the world is run by the British royal family, who are in fact German, they're not British.
No.
Goethe is their real name. And that they run everything, and they have done for centuries, and they're transdimensional lizards.
Yeah.
And he later on, when you're talking about the authority of a source, he later on admitted that he'd taken the extreme hallucinogen ayahuasca, and it was during an ayahuasca trip that he had perceived that the royal family were transdimensional lizards, and he'd now changed his mind. Now, if you take your information from drug trips, I'm afraid sort of not essentially correct.
It's not reliable.
And
we won't share the same foundation.
Yeah. So looking at the authority of the source and what interest they might have, are they selling me something? Are they selling me a pack of 10,000 milligrams of 10 grams of vitamin C, or have they got some cause in mind? When it comes to the analysis of information, we had a 5-day conference to deconstruct Scientology. I don't think anybody's done this with any other group. We had 27 speakers. We took it apart. One of the people who Professor Jim Beverly had invited was a toxicologist. And she took Ron Hubbard's Purification Rundown. Where you have 4 hours in a sauna and cold showers and
niacin.
Massive amounts of vitamin B3 in the form of niacin, but also increasing phenomenal, huge amounts. I mean, I met somebody who took this for nearly 150 days, and because you have to increase every day, and he was a black belt in karate and taekwondo. He was a very sharp guy. He was in a wheelchair and could barely answer a sentence after doing that. So, it can go badly wrong. But this whole thing of, so she very matter-of-factly took sentence by sentence what Hubbard had said about the Purification Rundown. And she sort of says, well, this is a speculation, of course. Oh, there is no evidence for this. And by the time she got to the end, there was nothing left. There was no, and yet it's put forward with such certainty. I mean, I talked with
such conviction.
I talked with Mike Rinder last week, and we put it up on Saturday, I think. And he baby watched Bruce Welch on the ship, who was this huge guy who basically had a psychotic episode. And so they locked him in a cabin, they chained the door to, and Mike had to sit there from midnight till 8 in the morning to make sure that nobody made a noise around him, because Hubbard had determined that with no stimulation from the outside, he would become sane. 2 weeks later, the acute psychotic episode, and that's why they're called acute, petered off. And most people, schizophrenics, there'll be, ups and downs. So this guy,
peaks and valleys. Yeah.
This guy calms down, and they get rid of him. They put him on a plane as soon as they can to get rid of him. And Hubbard declares that he's now got rid of the last reason for psychiatry. He has brought about, he can make somebody sane. And you kind of go, you researched one case? The gold standard in medicine is 1,000 cases. So when somebody gives you an indication that they're not really an authority, I mean, he researched LSD and he said, based on research into 2 cases, you got that, once you found out that somebody isn't really an authority, they're just making things up because it's the way they feel or the drug they took, which was true for Hubbard as well as David Icke. It's a different place. And part of that is consensus, so that where you have 97% of the tens of thousands of climate scientists all agreeing, you're going, there isn't 97% of agreement in any other scientific discipline, in physics, in biology, in chemistry, in mathematics. You'll never get that many people agreeing, which is why science is a really good thing, because people keep disagreeing and testing theorems and changing ideas along the way. So, yeah, finding out.
So you're currently working on a book.
I have. We're laying out the book. It's a revision of the existing book, Opening Minds, but we're calling it Opening Our Minds because there's enough that's changed in my thinking in the 5 years since I wrote it, and in trying to ever trying to be more clear, to clarify ideas so that they make more sense. And my interest since the 1990s has been how do these, why do we become so certain? Why do people become so passionate, so fanatical? And that's led me through the highways and byways of social science to understand these ideas and beyond, so that I have, I'm working with Yuval Laor, that his ideas are very important to what I'm doing, and I can borrow those because he's dealing
His
with
ideas on awe and experience,
all
and how people,
all
fervor,
belief, and
love,
and how we, and I think that in many cases what he's saying is true. I don't think in all cases what he's saying is true. I think that I think human being, we are capable of so many things, so that we can mimic conditions. This is one of the things that fascinates me in authoritarian groups, that people start to mimic the behaviors of those around them, but they also then and then those behaviors might be a bit crazy, but they'll take them on board, and they can appear to be crazy because they're mimicking your behavior, but they don't actually have the psychiatric.
Yeah, we had and that's one of the things in evaluating ex-members or current members that psychiatrists often don't take into consideration. The influence of the group think on their reality, and how the psychosis, absent the ideology and the influence of leadership, could slowly go away in a certain percentage of people.
It can quite quickly go away.
So,
I had a referral.
That's right.
I had a referral from a psychiatrist. A guy had been picked up on the side of the highway, talking to a 2 million year old parrot that he was hallucinating on his shoulder, which was a former incarnation of Ron Hubbard. So that's where it started. They pick him up. The psychiatrists have him for 2 weeks. They put him on sedatives to bring him down, but they can't find a way in. It took one afternoon of talking to the guy, because I knew what was going on in his head, and he came back down to earth. Sadly, when he then again received some Scientology processing against my advice, it went back.
Took him off.
Yeah. But and often psychiatrists will say it's religious fervor or some kind of strange category, where what they're dealing with is a behavior that would be considered normal within the group.
That's right.
Wow.
So I think I've got to go at this point, John.
It's been a great pleasure. So let's finish up.
Always good talking with you.
Yep. And I've been John Atack, and will continue so to be. And this is my friend Joe Kelly. We thank you very much for your time. We'll switch off our little record buttons at this moment. Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.